Hey, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Creator Toolbox. This is the show that explores the nuts and bolts behind your creator business, talking through our experience running our own. So I'm Colin Gray from thepodcasthost.com, joined by Jacob, as always, Jacob Anderson. How are you? How are you getting on? You well this week?
Yeah. Lots of adjustments. There's been so many changes recently in the way that I'm working. But getting there. Yeah, I'm well. Feel like I'm doing good work.
Cool.
Yeah, just
Let's dig into that. I want to hear a bit more about the productivity experiment we talked about last week, your new co-working, all of that stuff. I think so relevant to our listeners out there in terms of like how you work, like how do you actually keep flexible? We want this, what we want, isn't it? Keep flexible, be able to do great work, and still actually get good stuff done.
Yeah.
But let's jump into first. I've got a good topic here I want to jump into around real life content. So I find a lot of people struggle to find the topic in, the early days. They think they have to be uber entertaining, super entertaining, or do something really, really interesting. But obviously that's really hard to do anything really interesting. So I want to dig into how you can make content from things that you have really easy access to, but you might have even passed over it because it feels a bit boring, or even a lot boring, to be fair. And I've got a whole bunch of examples as well of people doing this that you can borrow from. So I think the way I term this is something around real life content. So what does that strike in you when I say that was real life content? You think of any examples?
Day-to-day vlogging, like the early 2000s or 2010s, like Casey Neistat and all that kind of stuff. That's what comes to mind.
Yeah. So that's kind of that's a start for it. So yeah, absolutely. Those early days where it's just people broadcasting their real life. I find though, that's the thing that puts people off trying to think about this kind of thing, because like Casey just seemed to have such an interesting life in New York. Although I agree, he was a great example of making banal stuff quite interesting. There's even like the kind of rise of I've totally forgotten his name. The bodybuilder guy that always wears his cap, always films in the car. Do you remember his name at all? I'll stick it in the description if you don't know it. But it's this guy who's grown a huge following. He's just a bodybuilder. He just like films himself in the gym, going in the car, talking about random stuff. So just filming really lo-fi. But really the niche that I think is really worth digging into actually is around work. It's around people who have potentially like perceivably boring jobs, but actually you can create great content out of it. Mm-hmm. So I think like people have been doing this for decades with both YouTube and a decade at least, with both YouTube and podcasting around if you sell a service, if you sell a product, like, how many podcasts can you name that's an agency, like either a marketing agency or a growth agency or something like that, that does a podcast teaching their topic?
Totally. Yeah.
Like millions of them around, isn't there? So they're a really good example to start with. But then you've got other ones, like there's a channel I came across recently called the Aquarium Co-op. So you have a shop, you sell like fish equipment, you sell the aquariums, but you also sell the fish. And this channel called the Aquarium Co-op, look it up on YouTube. And it's just this really interesting channel where he just talks about that kind of topic. So how's this for an example? We've got videos on really obvious ones like, where do I buy my aquarium fish? So questions that people are searching online. It's like classic SEO. What are your customers searching for online? But then also some entertainment stuff as well. What type of fish would you never touch again? So there's a kind of intriguing one, like what you're not going to get into, that kind of stuff. I like to look at the oldest ones sometimes, like go into videos and go to oldest and then see like, where are some ones, like what did he actually start out with?
Yeah.
Can you breed fish in a bucket? Beginner's Guide to Mini Fish Ponds. So, and you look at that, you look at the thumbnail of that, and what we're seeing here is just somebody like filming on their phone, essentially, looking at like just filming something that's just quite interesting to people that are really into fish. So it's a kind of boring subject to some people, but actually some people are really into their fish, they're into their aquariums. So you create content around that, and suddenly it's just like really exciting. So go on.
listen, like this guy started what 11 years ago, and you
Mhm.
would think I wouldn't think there's that much to say about aquariums and tropical fish. Now, I will probably get shot down by enthusiasts, but the guy's been going for 11 years.
Yeah,
He's made over 1,000 videos, 1,100 videos, and he's got, oh, that's a really pleasing number. 11 years, 1.1 thousand videos, and
yeah,
1.1 million subscribers. That
yeah,
is insane.
yeah, yeah,
So there's
absolutely.
literally
It's crazy. Yeah,
anything can be
yeah,
can be
absolutely.
extracted for the long term.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think if you're in a position where you're selling products to people, there's obvious demand because somebody's buying those products, and therefore there are people that are interested in those products. So I find so many people that deny that they could make a podcast about nuts and bolts. Like I sell
Yeah,
nuts and
yeah,
bolts to companies, but that's nonsense because there's people buying those things, and therefore you can find an angle on it to create that content, whether it's
yeah,
YouTube, whether it's social media, whether it's a podcast or anything. But actually, looking a bit deeper into this, I found the kind of the less obvious ones that give really good examples are there's some really interesting ones too. Like, for example, so there's a channel called Post 10, and
mhm,
what this guy does is he runs basically a construction company. He does like all sorts of stuff, like home demos, like residential electrical, lawn care, that kind of thing. And he just takes his phone or a camera with him on jobs. And the most popular stuff on his channel is generally stuff like unclogging drains.
right,
So complete draining flooded by ponds. So he's got a video here completely draining a flooded pond by unclogging a bridge.
yeah,
So he's gone out on the job and he's doing something that is like, I mean, seeming it's quite kind of work a day almost. You're just unclogging a drain, but this stuff's actually fascinating. Like you watch him
yeah. It's
doing
so
these
it's
things.
that day in the life like kind of
Yeah.
vlog style thing, and it's happening for so many different types of like businesses that I've noticed. Like ones that I always get seem to be like lawn care companies, and their shtick is that they will. They're a service provider in a local area. They will just go over to a home that has overgrown grass, either because
Yep.
like they're disabled or don't have the money or just haven't bothered to do it. And they'll just knock on the
Mhm.
door and say, "Can I do this for free?" And all I want to do is film it. You don't
Yeah.
have to pay me anything. He'll go and
Oh,
do it. He'll make
really?
some fake content out. But yeah, and it's kind of fascinating to see like someone to see anyone who's an expert at
Yeah.
something do their thing. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
also there's some things that are actually just quite satisfying to watch, like pool cleaning or like the before and after of like a really overgrown lawn. Like there's just there's so many of these small businesses that are managing to reach way beyond their kind of local area
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
creating interesting content about the
Absolutely.
day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, 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 and you can monetize that through your services. So maybe this guy doesn't sell his services to individuals, but it's to companies, and
Yeah.
it just people come across it. And if it's a high ticket item, you only have to have a few followers to actually make a decent living out of it. There was another one, this one called Matt's Off-Road Recovery. I love this one because this is a guy with technically maybe a boring job, as in he just recovers vehicles. He's just a tow truck guy. But I mean, you do that kind of job and you're going to get some pretty interesting situations, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah. There's gonna be all sorts of
I mean, this guy's,
shenanigans that are just fun
yeah,
to watch.
totally. This guy's
Yeah,
done quite well because he's based in a really interesting area where loads of people go out in their jeeps and they try and do off roading and they crash their jeeps in really crazy places. So he's got some videos of recovering jeeps from rivers, from like up cliffs, all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, some people have a slight advantage in that they're in a scenic place, but I'd argue that most people can find a way to make even quite seemingly banal work really well.
yeah. I
And it,
am.
yep,
Sorry, I was just gonna say there's a channel that I watch quite religiously. There's exactly this. I've just realised.
yep,
It's called Asheville, and it's a guy down in England, and he
mhm,
basically I think he tried to start this construction company out of just kind of nothing, and it's just showing like it almost got back to go into administration several times. Like it's been a
mhm,
really, really rocky journey, and it's honestly, it's kind of like watching a high budget drama sometimes. It's kind of what it
okay,
feels like.
yeah,
But it's just them like trying to find like a yard because they're getting kicked out of their old yard. They've lost the lease, and like that first you if you open it there, the first video, Oh, that's interesting. I've got a different one, but it's that one. Is this the end of Asheville? That's the one that caught me like 5 months ago, and they were in a really really horrible position. They might have had to close the company. They had dozens of people working for them. They
Really?
had all this
Yeah.
plant equipment. They had nowhere to put it, and like the lease situation in London is just not it's not good. But yeah, he's just managed to turn. I wonder how much this content actually supports his overall bottom line,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think it's probably quite high because the amount of effort that goes into it, and on top of the job that is obviously super demanding, it must be
Yeah.
worth it. I'd love to chat to him about it.
It has to be, yeah. There's I mean, yeah, absolutely. This is a B2B business, isn't it? So
Yeah,
it's hiring out trucks, it's doing waste management services to the construction industry. But all of that, I mean, any content like this raises your profile, doesn't it? It gets
yeah,
yourself out there more. And if you're in the industry, you're probably even more likely to come across this word of
yeah.
mouth and everything.
I
So,
actually I don't even for that company like that. And it's interesting. I don't think it's necessarily getting people getting clients who are
mm,
finding the videos, but I think being so public with yourself, being so public with your business and how you work and your values and
yeah,
how you
yeah.
think, all of that stuff, that is like if he went to tender, Asheville
Mhm,
went to tender
mhm.
versus another company that was your standard blue logo. We've got
Yeah,
loads of trucks and we're really good at what we do. Like, who would you pick? Would you pick the guy that shows you how the sausage is made and shows like how much he cares about the service that he's delivering extensively,
yeah.
documents it? Or would you go with the guy that has lots of trucks and promises they're really good?
Yeah,
I would
absolutely
probably go
agreed.
with the
Yeah,
the farmer.
yeah, yeah. And even the ancillary stuff to that, if you share, the people behind the company, the values, the personality,
Exactly.
recruitment, like finding people to work for you. You have
Yeah.
people that are probably applying. I bet you people are applying to that company way more than any other in that area. People shifting like waste management companies to go work for him. Even internally, like the team that works for him, they'll see all of this, and that'll be such a team motivator having this content go out. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be kind of self-selecting. Like some people might be might go out of the business because of it. They don't want to be involved in things like
Like,
that being quite public, but it'll
yeah.
attract people that match like the values, the ethos, the enthusiasm of the guy that's running this. So
Exactly.
yeah, all these extra things too.
Yeah.
I'll show one final one. Let's just so this one here is called the Hoof GP. And if you're not watching the video on this, I'll still describe it through to you, but it's worth going and having a look at this. For the simple fact that there's a whole YouTube channel dedicated to a vet going out and fixing cows' hoofs. So the thumbnails on this channel are just full of pictures of hooves, and it's just actually a bit minging in some cases.
The lovely
As
pussy
in,
ones where they've got
there's
to
a
get the abscesses out and ooh.
there's a fountain of pus from this cow's hoof. Wonderful, lovely. Who
Yeah.
would have like that is, I mean, if you're going to pitch an idea that is most likely to be shot down in flames, it's this. I'm going to create a channel just looking at cows' hoofs and like chopping bits off them and looking a bit minging. But no, it's got 2.3 million subscribers somehow.
People like
So
all sorts of things though. Like
yeah,
I think this actually is similar to the lawn care kind of one where it's an element of satisfaction. You know, there's this
yeah,
whole strange, I don't quite get it, subculture on the internet around watching, or I don't, maybe it's not so much a big thing anymore, but it was for a while, like popping videos. Do you know what I'm talking about?
popping.
I
No,
don't
no,
even
not
want to
at all.
describe it. Nah, it's pimple
Oh,
popping on
like
video and like
popping.
whiteheads and
Yeah.
yeah. And I think it's the same kind of. I think people get some sort of satisfaction from it, but
Ooh,
it's the yeah. But I think it's the same kind of thing with this.
yeah. Lovely. All right. Well, a final one as well. It's a wee bit of a wee bit of a different angle on it. Like if your job is not necessarily if it doesn't necessarily lend itself to good videos, then sometimes it's actually just using those skills to teach other people. So we talked earlier on about the marketing company, all that kind of stuff. So they're kind of more obvious. They're selling their services, but this one here that I'm showing now is called Chris Fix. So Chris Fix is actually just a mechanic by trade, but he just shows people how to fix their own cars. So it's taking the skill that he has in his work. He doesn't necessarily film his day-to-day work, but he films videos about how to fix certain things about cars, how to choose a good car, how to keep your car maintained, all that kind of stuff. So it's more like, the plumber that shows you how to do a DIY job, or, the electrician. No, actually, don't do DIY electrics. But yeah, so it's a slightly different angle on it, but still can work really nicely. So yeah, that's another example as well.
So, is there anything in like your life in the past or any point now? Is like, can you think of anything that you would want to do that you could apply this to for you?
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, yeah, I think you could. I think you genuinely can do it with any job, really. Like when I was a kid, my parents ran their own business running a golf driving range.
Okay.
So that's a kind of boring environment, but I got to see some really weird and wonderful things behind the scenes, like going in the back room and seeing how the ball dispenser worked, like filling that up, unblocking it when it got blocked, going out in the ball collector machine, stuff like that. Like it's all
Yeah,
stuff that people
yeah,
haven't done. Like I can imagine going out there with my phone and filming myself driving around, picking up balls, how that thing works. That's one of those satisfying videos, like watching a ball collector
exactly.
picking balls up off the ground, popping them into the buckets, and watching, being able to show how anytime I went out in that vehicle, you become the target. Like you get,
Yeah,
people are aiming at you, like they're turning as they're golfing, like aiming at you, and you get smacked a whole bunch of times, and it scares the absolute shit out of you when you get
make
hit by
great content though.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And then the time where it gets blocked and stuck, and you have to actually get out of the thing and try not to get hit by the actual balls. So stuff like that, I think. I don't know, just about any kind of boring job. What about you? Can you think of any that would be something that could have been interesting content in the past?
Definitely working in a kitchen.
Oh yeah,
Working in a kitchen. See if you could set up just like a GoPro or a few GoPros in a
mm-hmm.
kitchen on an average like Friday night service.
Yep,
The drama, the drama, the tension, the back chat, but also like the camaraderie and the support, and like
yeah,
it's got everything that you would expect to see in in like a proper drama. So
yeah,
yeah, something like that. And you know what?
yeah.
It would make people want to come to that restaurant because they would
It
get
would,
to know the
yeah,
actual people that are doing the work.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
the bear's basically the dramatized version of that, isn't it? Have
totally,
you seen
totally.
the bear at all? Yeah,
Yeah,
such a good
yeah,
program. Yeah, cool. Okay,
yeah. Just
I
final thing on that.
yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
before we
go
move
for it.
on, it's just
Yeah,
like while we've been talking through this, it's just we take for granted the things that we do every day,
hmm
and it's hard to imagine that things that we do every day that are really regular to us, that are really just routine, would be interesting to other people. But I think all of these examples kind of show that almost everyone watching, whether if you're making content or you're not, or if you know someone that isn't, but you just you've got that feeling that maybe they should. Um, People really are interested in the craziest things. You can
yeah,
find anything on YouTube, and you'll find a channel for it that's got a few 100,000 subscribers for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
So, like,
definitely.
I don't know, it's an interesting exercise
Yeah,
for you, the listener. Just have a look at your life, or even in the
yeah,
past as an exercise, but like day to day things that you do, like wherever it is that you work, whatever it is that you do, just the mundane stuff that people don't get to see every day. We all get so stuck in our own heads, our own routines, our own careers, and we forget that people outside of ourselves have whole interests and whole it's cool. It's worth
yeah,
thinking about.
definitely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. A final comment around a slight pivot to that is, even if you decide, you take that look at your life and you decide, really, there's nothing I want to film in my entire life, which I find really unlikely. But even if you end up feeling that way, there's an example in the form of a channel called Soft White Underbelly. And I haven't looked in detail at the videos here, but I just came across it in the research that I was doing for this.
Mhm.
And it's about it's a photographer, guy called Mark Leta. Again, I don't know much about him. I haven't. There's the reason I'm qualifying here is because I'm not. There's some of the content looks like it could almost be potentially a bit controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway because it looks like on the surface is a good example of someone who has taken his job, the fact that he just meets a lot of people through his photography, and just start telling other people's stories. So he just interviews the most random people. He has some stuff on here who are quite kind of obviously going to catch interest, like mob bosses, FBI agents, things like that. But then he's got other people, like he's interviewed a meth addict and just found out what their life is like.
Yeah.
And it's just a normal interview, and he has the advantage that he's great with photography, lighting, things like that. So he can create a really nice looking interview. But ostensibly, a lot of it is literally just people sitting in a room talking to a camera. It's like that kind of talking head approach.
Yeah.
So even if you decide, yeah, your own life is not interesting enough, I'm sure there's people around you that you could talk to and have conversations with. And again, people are just really interested in normal people that have maybe some slightly unusual things about their life or something like that. I think that can work nicely.
Yeah, definitely. It's yeah, I've just had a quick look, and it's just curiosity. I think that's what it
Yeah.
is. Even if there's not something in your life right now that is like you think is prime for filming, or you're not comfortable with it, or whatever. I think like as long as you have enough curiosity and drive, that's really all. That's what this is in a really kind of artful way. You know,
Yeah.
curiosity about people and
Yeah.
being able to ask a question and like, yeah, great point.
Absolutely. The last two that I'll mention very briefly, I found in my research. One was called Legal Eagle. It's a lawyer who talks about. Well, he tries to make the law more common, essentially. So, law, a pretty boring subject, ostensibly, but he basically tries to explain the law, helps people understand the law, just find interesting things about the law through really interesting lenses. So, one of his formats is, the tried and tested real X reacts to. So his is obviously real lawyer reacts to Suits. So he watches an episode of Suits and tells you how absolute nonsense half of the stuff they do in Suits is, or Better Call Saul, or My Cousin Vinny. And another one of his formats is Laws Broken, which I found really fun, actually. He does an episode on Jurassic Park and just talks through every part of Jurassic Park where they're just completely and utterly flouting the law. Like going into the intro part in Jurassic Park where they're bringing in a velociraptor, and you've got the boss guy holding a shotgun in front of all his team, and all the team holding these electric prods and stuff like that, and the rest of his team all standing up on the top of the cage, like with no barriers, all this kind of stuff. He's like, but right, okay, so exposed firearm, cattle prods like waving around in people's faces. That staircase is not up to code. And again, that sounds kind of dull, but actually it's not. It's really fun, entertaining. It's just a good watch, and it teaches you a bit at the same time. And a team that we worked with did something similar. So we worked with a team called Blackadders on a podcast, just an audio podcast where they were an employment law team who explained employment law topics, but they always found a really cool lens to go through. One example being they did a whole episode about dismissal. So how to fire somebody. If you're in the US, you probably don't quite get this, but in the UK, it's actually very difficult to fire people for rightly. Like, it's to look after the employees. So you have to be really really careful about how you do it and how you justify it. And if you want to get rid of somebody, there has to be all this sort of paperwork and red tape around it, which again is good. It covers people, it helps protect people. But they did it in the form of the Seven Dwarfs. So Sleepy. So how you can fire people for being a bit sleepy and lazy. They had Grumpy. How you can fire people for being rude to your boss, for being rude to employees, all that kind of stuff. So they put them in the form. Each episode was a different dwarf from the Seven Dwarfs, and like framed it in that sense. And it was really fun. It was really entertaining how they put it together, and it just made a lot of sense because they put it in that context. So
that's probably the best example out of all of them, because I honestly cannot think of anything more dull in this world than employment law.
Employment law, yep.
And I kind of want to listen.
But that show actually does really well. They've got a great listenership on it. They've done something like 7 or 8 seasons now, if not more. And it's gotten clients. Like, they've talked to me about it. They've said this brings in clients for us, like day in, day out, because people listen to it. They search employment law on the web. They find the content. They're trying to understand it. They're trying to learn it. They come across our podcast, whether it's through search or they've been told by other companies. You know, people who run businesses talk to other people who run businesses. Mm-hmm. So they find this content. It's out there. So yeah, it's excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope that gave a decent wee grounding in how to use real life content, how you might find things from your own life to create really interesting content, and how not to overlook and take for granted, like you said, Jacob, how not to take for granted the things that you have access to that other people might be fascinated by, how that could work as content, how it could help to grow your own audience, how it could help to grow a business, all of those things. So yeah, I hope that was useful. Right. Jacob, update. How are you getting on? So
Oh, I'm
last
good.
time, so we talked recently about your productivity experiment. Do you want to just do a quick recap on that?
Yeah, so I two big changes in my life. One, I moved from 5 days a week, which I've been since the start of my career, to 4 days a week for the first time. And the second thing, so that's not an experiment, that was just a decision. The experiment is breaking up my days into 2 blocks, with the sort of thesis that having space in the middle would give me more sort of creative energy, more mental energy, in both of the blocks. So I talked about that last time we recorded. It's been a full week since we recorded that I've done it, maybe more. And the findings, I think, are it's not as dry cut as that. It does work. It does work. But what I found is on the days that I didn't have any particular thing planned to do in that gap, I actually ended up having less energy in the second block.
Hmm.
So I found that I was kind of mixing it up. And this all comes back to environment for me. And I've done a lot of sort of thinking recently about what I've been thinking of it as like marbles on a plate, and the plate is spinning, and you have to keep all of the marbles moving, and
Right.
any slight sort of gravitational change, and all the marbles can go in disarray. And it's all very delicate, and you have to get everything quite right. And one of the big things for me, and I think everyone has these marbles of creative and mental well-being. One of the big things for me is environment, where I am when I work.
Mm-hmm.
What's it feels like to be at work versus not at work, and getting that separation, being able to turn off. And I think a lot of it comes back to that, of associating a workplace with somewhere that I turn off, and I force myself not to work. Because I have honestly sometimes a problem switching off, deciding not to work. Because why should I? I'm on a roll. I should keep going, and that's all fine and
Yeah.
well until like you're like a week into that sort of mentality, and then you're just dead, and you rot for the weekend, and you get back to work on the Monday, and you're like, it's just one big mess. And then that's how the burnout happens for me. Anyway, I digress. The environment's really important. So I've found that being able to go to a co-working space close to where I am does a lot, and actually mixing the two together. So if I'm in a co-working space, the change of environment is a rich enough addition to my day that I didn't feel like I was getting any benefit from splitting it into two. And I tried it on the days that I was working at home, and actually I think it's a working from home thing. I think it's a working from home thing. So if I'm working from home, or if I have to work from home, like today I have to work from home because it's an environment that I can control to record. And lots of people just either have to work at home, can work at home, choose to work at home, whatever the reason is. But for me personally, spending 8 hours at home working doesn't add up well. Like it's not as if like it's not like I can't do it. It's just not perfect, and it doesn't add up well over time. If I do that too many days in a row, too many weeks in a row, the net sort of productivity out of it's not what it should be. I'm not happy with it. But I found that the days that I've worked at home, splitting the day up and giving myself that different environment, whether it's co-working space or it's going out to, like, I went to a mall one day, I went a walk down one part of the town that I'd never been to. I took my new camera out one day to do a just a small muck around kind of street photography shoot during the day. And I found that actually it replaced the need for co-working. And I think that maybe that's a little insight that I could give the reader, the listener, and it's that for people that don't have an option about working from home, and you feel kind of you just, it doesn't work well for you long term, like me. Try the working in 2 blocks thing, and try breaking up the day, because yeah, the math checks out for me. It might not for you, but yeah, it just all comes back to that environment, whether it's at home and splitting it up, or it's having a co-working space to go and work in. Yeah, that's where I am. with it. I'm still playing around with it, but it's not actually what I expected. I thought that I would do that every day, whether it was at home or in co-working, and it would work great both ways. But yeah, I don't know. It feels like it gets in the way when I'm at co-working because I'm already in such a good flow when I'm around other people doing hard work. But when I'm by myself and there's no other passive influences of other human beings trying to do hard things, then yeah, it gives me energy. It gives me energy going out and you know getting in amongst the world for a few hours. Yeah, uh, edit point,
There's
Colin.
yeah,
You're
at a
mute.
point. Yeah, there's something about transition when it comes to work for me. Maybe that's what it ties into around energy and transition because I'm the same. I much prefer to work away from home. And I think a big part of it for me is the change, the transition from one environment to another.
Mhm.
And even more so these days, actually, I've started having the practice of I would love to be able to walk to work, but it's just a bit too far for me. It's almost manageable, which is kind of frustrating, but it's just a bit too long to fit into the day. So I drive to work, but it only takes me 5, 6 minutes. And but I when I get to work, I go for a walk, like for 10 minutes, just around my work before I start, because I
Yeah,
think that gives me a bit more energy, both the exercise, but also just sort of seeing a bit of the outdoors and everything. And then I get into the office and I'm fine for the day. But I do go out for a long walk at lunch as well. I always go
yeah,
out for an hour. That gives me another wee transition, something to do. It's a change of purpose. I'll often look for a mission for lunch.
yeah,
Like I need to go and get this thing that I need for home, even if it's as simple as like literally yesterday, I ran out of mouthwash at home. So I went to buy it. That was my mission for
yeah,
lunch yesterday. And that gave me a purpose to go for a walk and then coming home. But yeah, I find that really interesting. You're talking about that. Like when you're at home, you don't get that transition. So actually, it's more worthwhile going out for a couple of hours at lunchtime and having a purpose to that as well. So yeah, I totally get that. That makes a lot of sense to me,
yeah.
actually. Yeah, because I often lose energy working at home much earlier than I do when I'm out, for sure.
Totally. Like 3 o'clock drop off almost
Yeah,
every time.
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
you power through it and you get it done, but it probably only adds up to an hour of work rather than two. Do you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
in terms
yeah,
of like the
yeah.
the,
How did
the overall
you
activity.
how did you choose your co-working space? Because that's something that a lot of people deal with is like where to work and
Yeah,
the balance between, like you're saying, like you've got full control over your home environment. It's quiet, it's peaceful, all that kind of stuff. But then there's loads of benefits from co-working too, but then downsides as well. Like, how did you choose the one you ended up in?
yeah. It's kind of cheating because I've kind of researched many of the co-working spaces in where I am just now in Chiang Mai in Thailand, and this is probably per capita one of the best places to find a really high quality co-working space in the world. So I went with one that was going to give me two things, because the two things that are important for me right now in a co-working space is plenty of people. It's not too quiet. So the co-working space that I was in before, one in Edinburgh, great space, but I was in the quiet part that was a little bit more expensive, and it had a dedicated desk rather than the hot desk. There was no one ever in it because everyone just got the cheaper one, which was the hot desk. And I did I had a much better time working in the hot desking part, but they asked me to stop doing it because I was taking up a seat that someone that was paying for that was, and we had a dedicated desk. And anyway, I had to stop working in the bit that was kind of active with people. Like I say, like people head down doing hard work. There's just something about it. I just thrive off it. So that was one thing. It needs to be not dead. There needs to be people there doing hard things. But the other thing that's important to me right now is a social aspect.
Mm,
And I think that's something that is a big benefit of a co-working space,
yeah,
because you can go and work in a coffee shop. There's plenty of nice coffee shops around here that I could go and work in. And if it were just as simple as needing another environment, then I would just do that. It's cheaper, you
mhm,
know.
mhm,
But it's not. It's the social aspect of it as well. And a lot of co-working spaces, including the one in Edinburgh that I went to before, have really good or they put thought into the community aspects of it,
mhm,
some more
yeah,
than others, and they will have organized meetups. But like the one that I'm at just now, it's similar. So I've been to two co-working spaces in my life that have had a bar, and that was WeWork and this one. And on a Friday, this bar opens, and it actually just turns into a bar. And everyone that's there at the end of the day on a Friday just transitions over to the bar. From what I see,
Yeah.
I've not actually been. I'm going to go tomorrow, so I'll report back. And that, yeah, that was one of the things. And it's filled with people building things and creating things, and it's that type of environment. Like
Yeah.
there's other type of like there's old school co-working spaces like a Regis,
Yeah.
if you've heard of that
Yeah.
company, and
Yeah.
I
Totally.
can't think of anything worse, because I associate Regis with old guys in suits need
Yeah.
somewhere to do their
Just so
accountancy.
sterile. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a vibe thing. It's a vibe
Yeah.
thing, not to
Yeah.
sound too zoomery, but it is.
Yeah, I absolutely the same. When I was in Adelaide for the year, I set up a really good space at the house. I was lucky. We chose the house basically based on the fact that I had a space that I could set up a studio, a good recording area, because I needed it for the year. And I really enjoyed working there, but only I think I ended up my routine was 2 days a week there. So I would go to a co-working space Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I would sit in my outdoor office Tuesday and Thursday, and I would schedule my recordings and all that kind of stuff based around that.
Mm,
But I chose the co-working space I went to. If anyone's out there in Adelaide or nearby, I think there's others in other Aussie cities too. It's a chain called Watso, and I went there because of the vibe. It was really nicely decorated. It's all kind of warm wood, loads of plants. I went in and there seemed to be lots of people working on more creative type things. I walked in, I remember doing the tour and I saw people working on some graphic design projects, some web design. There was a few companies had full rooms hired and the companies looked like they were creatively inclined, all that kind of stuff. It just felt like a nice place.
yeah,
And it had free coffee. So that's the most important thing.
that goes a long way.
But yeah, they had social things as well based around that, and yeah, just a really cool place. So it makes a big difference. But it's worth touring around, I think, because I tried a few there in
Yeah,
Adelaide too, which were more the Regis vibe, and they didn't give you the energy, they didn't give you the kind of homeliness of feeling like you had a real place to go and work every day
yeah.
and feel a bit at home there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It feels like but what you're saying about the plants and the nice kind of wooden whatnots, it makes a big difference as
Mhm.
well, I think.
Yeah.
Like, there are places that feel more creative than
Mhm.
others, and it is easier to be
Yeah.
creative in those places. I actually think
Yeah.
cafes are a great place to be creative because there is the hustle and bustle of the people, and there's coffee for a start, which is
Yeah.
essential to all creativity. But yeah, it's just such a kind of transitory environment. I find that's a great place to knuckle down for like a couple of hours and do something creative, come up with a plan, or refine a plan, or I've done quite a lot of web design and web dev in cafes. Actually, it's a great place to do it.
Yeah, see,
Yeah,
I just can't deal with the fact that you don't have a monitor. I can't work on a laptop monitor. It's just too small.
yeah. These are the trade
Yeah,
offs we make
indeed, indeed.
for
Cool. All right.
flexibility.
Yeah, good to get an update. Cool. Thanks for that. It'd be good to hear how that progresses over the year that you're out there or more even.
Yeah, we'll see.
Indeed. Right. I've got one final topic to go through.
Mm,
I've been well, for better or worse, I struggle with books. I love reading. I'm a big fiction reader, but when it comes to non-fiction, I don't think I've ever found myself a great reading process whereby I actually take in and action the stuff that I read. I think I'll read books and I'll take one or two things as I'm skimming through it, and I'll maybe put one or two of them into action at the time. But even 6 months later, I'll struggle to remember what's in a book, and I'll probably not have done much with like 90% of what's in there. Does
yeah.
that resonate, or am I just a bit crap with books?
No, it totally does. It totally does. I am super guilty of skipping a lot of non-fiction books as well, just because a lot of them it's just fluff, and
There's so
the
much fluff.
middle of it is just like it's like trying to set up. This is why you should listen to me, and this is why this is the right way to do this, and this is why this is the right way to think about this.
Yep.
And here's what you should actually do. It's like
Yep.
get me to that quicker. I've bought this book for a solution, so I don't think it's all your fault.
Yes, good, good. I'm glad. Well, what I've been doing recently, is to use AI for this. So I've been using Claude a lot with the projects. I think the Claude projects approach, which actually I think you told me about initially,
Mhm.
has been
About
really
2 weeks ago
useful for
then.
me. Yeah, cool. To build essentially your own custom GPTs for all sorts of purposes. And one of them is simply taking a book that I own and I've got a PDF of and uploading it to GPT to start parsing that book. And I found this so useful. So I've got an example I can talk you through. So
Yeah,
I've
please.
been looking at much more YouTube recently. So like up to date sort of strategies around how to grow a YouTube channel, all that kind of stuff. And I've bought a couple of books on this, and I got a PDF with one of them. So I've uploaded that to ChatGPT, sorry, to Claude, to a project, and started working with that. I find that um, you'll have come across the likes of Blinkist and
Oh
that
yeah.
do book summaries, yeah.
Yeah.
And I have used Blinkist to good effect in the past, but I've often found when I find a good book and I read the Blinkist summary and it does give me the top level, and you can get a bit from that,
Mhm.
but there's parts of it I want to dig down into. And part of the fluff I find in books is the stories, the examples, all of the stuff that goes around it, the case studies, all of that kind of thing. Um, that's what makes a book very time consuming to read and skim through. But actually, when you find a part you want to use, suddenly those stories and case studies become really useful.
That's it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you go back to like reference them for more
Yeah,
kind of more detail and
exactly.
background.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the Blinkist approach is great to start with, but actually at points you want to start digging into really how do I implement this? Like I get
Mhm.
the concept that you're describing in summary in Blinkist, but really I need the book now to dig into the case studies and the detail. And I find that's what Claude's really good at. So like for example, earlier on, I was looking at examples of YouTubers. So it partly inspired the topic we talked about earlier in this episode around people that are doing real life content. And so I said to the PDF, like, give me all of the examples in this PDF and structure it in this way. So in front of me now in Claude, I've got each of the examples, each of the case studies. And I said to Claude, give me the following. I want to know the channel name. I want to know the channel URL. I want to know a very quick summary of what the content is. I want what their unique take is on the content. So I want to know how they have taken that topic and made it unique. And then I want to know learnables from that video. And so for every case study that's in this book, Claude has summarized those specifics for me based on that very specific prompt. And so in front of me now, I've got a list of 4 or 5 of the case studies, even more actually. I think there's about 10 in here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. So 10 I have at the start, and it gives you all of those examples. It's really good. So I can be really specific about my questioning of the book. Suddenly it's as if I'm talking to the author
Yeah.
and I can ask questions of their content. And a big part of this is, I think one of the troubles with AI, tell me if you agree with this or not, Jacob, is I think you've
Mhm.
told me even something to this effect in the past. One of the big troubles of AI is it's drawing from such a large knowledge base that it just actually becomes a bit banal. It just
Yep.
averages everything out too much. So it feels like narrowing it down to one book, one opinion, presuming you trust that person, that author, then suddenly it becomes much more actionable. Is that what you find?
Yeah, 100%. It's the quality of the input, and it the if you ask it like what's one of the books as an example?
So, well, this book's just called the YouTube Formula.
Okay.
So it's just about how to grow a YouTube channel.
If you ask
Yep.
ChatGPT or Claude,
Mhm.
um, what is the formula to starting a successful YouTube channel? It
Yeah.
will answer it. It will answer it every single time. And there will actually be some decent advice in there. But like you say, it is reading every not reading, but it is pulling from every crap article that was ever written, every derivative guide to starting a YouTube channel, and that's all making it in there. But if you give it not just a question, but you actually give it the material
Yeah.
that you want it to source the answer from,
Yeah.
the output is much better. That works for this is I've never really tried it in the way that you are, and I'm actually really interested to do it because I've got a few books that I can think of I'd like to do it with.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
works really well for writing as well, and that is how I've been using it. I've certainly found that to be true.
Yeah.
If you give it the material that you want it to work with, rather than asking it to just think it based on its training,
Mhm.
the quality of the output is much better.
Mhm. Yeah, cool. Yeah, here's a couple of examples. So here we go into let me show you on screen. So I'm typing in like, give me a top three growth tactics for an educational channel based on this book. So I can be really specific about the type of channel as well. It comes out with, so number one, optimize your content for retention and engagement. Create compelling hooks in the first 15 seconds. Use pattern interrupts throughout the video. Then you go on to develop a strategic video buckets content plan. Group your videos into related categories or buckets. Create data relationships between videos in the same bucket. Collaborate with other creators in your niche. So it's come up with some really specific examples taken from that book based on my question. I can start to dig into this. So what are, video buckets? What does that actually mean? And it'll give me a nice, concise summary of that based on the book. So it's almost like, yes, I could pick up the book and I could ask this question of the book itself. I could skim around. I could look at the chapter titles. I could find this information in here, but now I don't need to because I can literally just talk to it and use it as. And here it's given me a really good summary of what video buckets are: definition, purpose, benefits, how to implement. I wonder if I put in, so our topic is how to create a creator business. How would this apply to us? So one of the things I wonder about, and I'm going to develop in this, is you can obviously, with a Claude project, you can give it really clear project instructions. So I want to make sure I put in those instructions, like, please only draw from the book, because I don't want it to go outside the book. But then what do you think in terms of, do I want it? Maybe I do want it to bring in outside influences in some cases. Would that make sense, or would that start to dilute the content, I wonder?
So the thing to keep in mind is that even if you tell it, just stick to the book, the second you ask a question that's not answered by the book is going to go to that training data. So you kind of want to account for that. And one thing that I like doing to get around that is ask it to warn you when something isn't included in the book. Because then it is aware in every conversation that you have of what's in the book and what's not. And that means that you avoid not hallucination, which is the term for when it just makes things up, because it won't necessarily make it up, but it will just give you some of that derivative advice. So that may be one thing to try with your prompt is ask it to warn you when something's not in the book, but still answer it. Edit point. You're muted.
Edit point. I was typing. I keep muting it when I'm typing. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's just about making sure those instructions are really clear. And I've found this with Claude projects, actually. I'm constantly refining those instructions. And if you haven't come across this, if you're watching a YouTube video, I'll show you on here. But if you're not, if you're just listening, in every Claude project, you have project knowledge. You can add content to that project knowledge. So I can upload the PDF. I could upload 3 or 4 books to this and give it a more balanced brain, essentially a more balanced set of information. But you can also click on set custom instructions, and that is where you put those more general instructions, like what you've just said, Jacob, like only reference the book. If you don't, please make that very, very clear. And how to answer as well. And I'm constantly, when I'm working with these projects, I'm constantly updating these custom instructions over time to make it better and better, I find.
Yeah. The thing to know about those custom instructions as well is that Claude is trained to listen to those instructions over any other. So it's one thing to put an instruction which says only use content in the book, and if you're going to go outside, then warn me. If you put that in the custom instructions, it's different to putting that in your first message. It will listen to the custom instructions above other things. Not completely, but it does. It makes a big impact. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Yeah. Right. I'm going to try one more. What's best practice for thumbnails for a small channel in the educational space, teaching creators? I wonder if it'll give some specifics. This is what I'm interested in, like how specific it can get, as in, can it apply context? So it'll apply like what the book teaches to your particular area. And it says small educational channel. So clear close-up image of a person's face showing emotion. consistent with branding elements with fonts, consider numbered lists, your how-to phrasing. That feels like it's more specific to educational. Numbered lists or how-to phrasing. Yeah, so I mean, it's put a bit of. I'd have to dig into it to make sure it's kind of been able to. Maybe that's where you're going to have to give it specific instructions around how to bring in external context.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it is starting to bring in training around our particular area. Yeah, it's interesting.
I think what you're missing here as well, so similar to the other thing around asking it to tell you when it's going outside of the scope of the book.
Yep.
What you want to put in your prompt, you want to ask it to, because you're giving it a book. It has page numbers. It has chapters.
Yep.
Put in that custom instruction for every response.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a citation. Tell me what page this is. What page I can go and read more about this.
Yep. Okay, let's try this out. So for every response, please give me a citation. Tell me what chapter and page it appears on. All right, save instructions. Right, what we'll ask it. What do you want to know about growing a YouTube channel?
Oh, I don't know. You've read the book. I don't know what's in it.
I mean, I've not read much of it yet. Okay, right. What about how do you create a great intro for a YouTube video that really hooks people in? Okay, we'll try that, see if it gives us the citations now. So I've added that to the instructions. Yeah, here we go. Perfect. So based on the info in the book, here's some key points. The hook is the first element in the story arc pattern for engaging video content. It gives you curiosity. And it says chapter 13, page 159. See, that really interests me. That actually makes it much better because it shows how, when I'm reading a book, I might just look up the section that says how to create a great intro. And that'll probably give you most of the info, but actually there's a bunch of other chapters that talk about it as well and tie it to other concepts. So there's the whole idea of, if you just go in and read one section of a book, you are going to miss some of the wider context, some of the wider ideas around it, maybe even some of the case studies that are useful. But this then outlines, it's almost like a really interactive index that shows you all the parts of the book and can summarize them at the same time. So we're getting parts from chapter 13, parts from chapter 12, parts from chapter 20. So chapter 19 as well.
And importantly, just in the way that it works, how you get that output, asking it to give you those citations will push it further towards making sure that it's only taking things from the book.
Yeah.
Just because you're asking for them.
There's an interesting thing. Look, it's brought in a quote by itself, but I would now go back and I would go into my custom instructions and I would type in, please do give quotes for all instructions that really highlight how to put things into action. So I would do that as well because I'd love to see that, like the actual quotes from the book as well that really highlight. So maybe I can redo that. I'm going to recopy how do you create a great intro video that hooks people in. I'm going to pop that in again. And now, with any luck, it's going to give us quotes for everyone as well. Oh, it's gone off the rails. It starts giving me code. No idea what's happened there. I've made oh no, it is bringing in. It's just I would just need to refine the instructions there. Something's happened around giving me some Python code, but also the quotes. That's fine. We would refine that, but it seems to work in principle. That's cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm gonna be using this a lot more actually. There's a bunch of books I want to go back to and revisit, like you suggested earlier, and really kind of re-question them.
Yeah.
I feel like almost it could be more useful for that purpose, like things that I know I really enjoyed in the past that I don't necessarily want to dig back into and read the whole book again. But actually, I remember enough about it that I could say, oh, here's my context now. How would I apply that thing that I read in this chapter? Or something like that. I'm not sure. Yeah. Perfect. Any more thoughts on that before we tie it up?
No, I've never really thought of using it this way. So I'm really interested to try it now. Yeah.
Great stuff. Okay, cool. All right, hope that was useful in setting up your own Claude projects, be able to do something with them in future, parse books much better. I'll update on how I find it in future too.
Yeah,
All
brilliant.
right,
Looking forward
I
to it.
think that'll do it for the day.
Sweet. That'll be good.
If you're out there listening, I hope you found that useful. If you want to support the content we put out, please do check out the products we offer. So Alitu is one. Alitu is our podcast maker app. It's designed to make it as easy as humanly possible to make a podcast, just like this one. So if you go over to alitu.com, that's ALITU.com, there's a 7-day free trial, and you can try out our call recording, our solo recording, full audio cleanup as well, does your noise reduction, your leveling, all that kind of stuff. There's a full editing tool built in there. So you've got text-based editing so that you can just edit like it's a Word doc, as well as waveform-based editing to then clean up all the detail, make you sound really polished. And finally, the hosting as well. So to publish that podcast, you can use our free hosting that's built in up to 1,000 downloads, which actually suits most podcasts for a long time. So again, alitu.com, that's ALITU.com for a 7-day free trial. Thank you again for listening. We'll talk to you on the next episode. We'll see you then.
Cheers, folks. Bye.